Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to our red pill versus blue pill. Hope y'all are doing well. Came in a little early today, probably because I'm in a better mood than usual. But life is going pretty well, and I'm hoping the same for y'all. Today I voted and dropped Kaya off at the groomers. But we're not here for that. We're here talking about the usual deprescribing. My name is Dr. DeLon Canterbury. I'm the founder of the Deprescribing Accelerator, as well as Geriatrics. And I am a board certified geriatric pharmacist who is passionate about integrating, implementing, and sustainably monetizing deprescribing within our senior facing organizations, from home health to nursing homes, assisted living facilities, LTCs, adult daycare centers, area agencies on aging. The list goes on and on and on. Adult care centers, there are caregiver support groups, there are tons of avenues that I feel our community has yet to capitalize on. And it's integrating and leveraging pharmacists to the top of our license. So welcome back to our weekly series. We will meet every Thursday around 12 or 12:30, discussing again the red pill versus the blue pill. The red pill, of course, symbolizes us unleashing our potential as deprescribing advocates and breaking free from this health system that feeds and thrives on us in this world of sick care. So welcome back. Today we're really talking about some of the mindset shifts I've had to make in starting to put the word and the gospel of deprescribing out into our communities. And there were many a naive approach I took in, one, starting a business, two, positioning myself, learning how to market, learning how to convey and communicate the value that I have and we have as pharmacists and as clinicians who want to see a different avenue for our seniors who are a little bit tired of the usual 20 med list that no one wants to touch until they're in hospice, and then we want to wean them off of everything, and then suddenly the patient gets better. I am never going to be against medicine. I hope that's never conveyed in my videos. I feel like I say it every time, but I am against the medication mindset that we have in this country from the provider end and from the patient end. We're just kind of fed that pills are the only way to get better. And of course, I'm not poo-pooing pills. I am poo-pooing this trigger happiness that I feel we thrive on. And well, the guidelines say so. So that's what we always do. And we don't fund and incentivize preventative measures or even other modalities of healing. And we kind of just are quick to write off our patients without even giving them the tools to better advocate for themselves. And so I'm all about leveraging our degrees to be better community advocates and to be better patient advocates, and to see this as, frankly, an unmet need. We have an entirely growing senior population with what we have we had 10,000 geriatricians maybe about 5-10 years ago. Now we're down to maybe, I don't know, 7,200 geriatricians in the entire country, with a population that is expected to almost double from 2010 to in 2030. And that spells, well, a world where there are less senior care providers. And so, as a geriatric pharmacist, I think the time is now for us as drug experts, as deprescribers, as deprescribing advocates to really start pushing and owning this movement of less meds and better preventive health, but using evidence-based strategies to put this into policy and to change the way we approach care. Because I'm really sick and tired of polypharmacy and prescribing cascades and duplicate therapies and all these other terms literally adding to the expense that we in our healthcare system as taxpayers are paying and our loved ones are suffering from, right? It shouldn't be this way. So, in starting geriatrics, in talking about selling these comprehensive med reviews and deprescribing action plans I've developed for my patients, I learned very quickly that it's not about really the med review. It's helpful. It's there. You got to do it. It's necessary to have a dialogue and find opportunities to deprescribe. But we have to holistically treat the patient. And that's one of the things that being on the African American COVID task force in Durham has taught me was learning how to meet people where they are, learning how to understand what social pressures and barriers that we are facing or they are facing. I say we because I am a Black man in America. So I understand some of that, of course, but understanding how these determinants from your zip code, again, are going to impact your longevity, your outcomes. These things matter. And so you don't really learn that quite as much in pharmacy school, maybe in public health school, but it's great to see how it's more than just a med review, right? And in starting this business, I'm just thinking, well, we got to stop X, Y, Z, and boom, everything will be better. And it's not always the case. And so there were really 5 core crippling beliefs that I took into this space with my company that honestly limited what I thought was even possible for myself as an advocate, as a provider, and for my patients. And this is a space of constant learning, right? We're not going to just know all the answers for every person. It's going to take some time and research. But for me, in trying to market and leverage deprescribing and advocate, frankly, one of the beliefs that kind of kept me kind of stuck was underestimating how much our providers, our prescribers, like really need help. Like they know that it sounds warm and fuzzy to get people off meds, but they really don't know how, and they don't have a clue. And so I started getting humbly more surprised at how many providers were like really interested in this and like bought into having a pharmacist work with their patients one-on-one or with their potential clinic for other patients was reassuring. It was reaffirming in what we hear all the time in the hospital, right? Oh my God, thank God for the pharmacist, because I wrote some order and I don't know what would have happened if, and we get those kudos, right? But I was transitioning from retail to this space. So it was like a new kind of frontier for me, but I would kind of be afraid. Let me be honest. I would be afraid to go to physician offices and highlight the work I've done because I wasn't confident. I just felt, yeah, I've had a couple patients, but I wasn't really comfortable doing that in the beginning. So I would say that crippling belief of not having that confidence when I'm already the drug expert was something that took some time for me to flex. In fact, it wasn't really until really last year I started getting more confident in being able to communicate that value to providers and patients. So in the beginning, I was a little tepid and timid and just, yeah, that wasn't happening. I wasn't going to be making a pitch deck and going into an office and trying to get people to contract with me. So there's a little bit of fear for sure, and confidence, and maybe ego in a little bit of a way. But I will say that there was a demand. There was a pretty huge demand, and in knowing that there is a demand, that spells opportunity. But a piece of me didn't want to really be aligned to a physician office. I preferred going the patient directly route. So part of me just didn't want to deal with that because I liked doing it alone. I was like, I don't want to go to another office if I've been doing that for the rest of my, like before. I don't want to go back and clock in for someone, even though I could do it at home. I didn't like that. So I was like, I'll just do it alone. So that's what I did. And, there are different ways you can do it, but I absolutely, this is number 2, I absolutely wasn't really aware of the senior advocacy space. I wasn't aware of how many players are in senior care. And I am still learning that there are tons of accrediting bodies for nursing homes. There are accrediting bodies for home health. There's a whole world of vendors that directly contract with some of these facilities. There's a whole world of caregiver advocacy, patient advocacy, policy. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so I, in the beginning, was not very specific on who that target audience was supposed to be. Like, should I use some of these other types of businesses and create a referral system, or use them to contract with them directly with an in-house affiliate program or something? And I got a bit overwhelmed because I was like, I don't know where to start. So I would say number 2 was not specifically picking my deprescribing audience. Okay, so who am I focusing on? Falls risks? Am I focusing on opioid deprescribing? Am I focusing on dementia deprescribing? I'm gonna be honest, I was all over the place. I was deprescribing for everybody. I was the dementia, I was opioids. I really rode the dementia wave because, of course, that aligned with my grandmother who suffered from dementia, and I had a personal reason behind that. But I wasn't thinking more broadly about being more specific and having that really, really honed in, because I was more of a generalist. I was like, hey, I'll help anybody who's dealing with this. And then I started doing pharmacogenomics, and then that just became my whole MO, was prescribing using pharmacogenomics. So I became more of a genomics expert for seniors and reducing falls and anti-psych meds. Our seniors deal with a lot of the anxiety and depression, right? So great market for that. Behavioral health clinics, there's tons of opportunity for that too. So that was super helpful. But I will be honest, I was still all over the place. So I wasn't like honed into one type of like deprescribing service. So number 2 was not being specific. And it was, the belief was, well, I can do it all. And I was like, no, Delon, I can't do it all. you could do some things at 80% great, but you can't do everything 100% awesome. So I wasn't doing that at first. And I think that may have confused who my target audience was, right? Because now my potential patients were like, well, is he the genomics guy? Is he the opioid deprescriber? Is he dementia? Which one is it? And if you're confusing your clients, well, they're not going to buy. So that was something I had to learn in terms of marketing and consistency within niching down in my service, my primary service. Another one that came to mind was also this well thinking that the med review was the end all be all of the patient's like care, right? And you're gonna get, I talk about the med list, the 36 meds down to 8 patients. We had another patient, we had 15 meds, we got them down to 7. I mean, we consistently try to have people's med lists with objective evidence-based strategies. And in doing that, at first I was thinking it was just only over medication, where it's really not always just over medication, right? There are issues where there are patients that have really, really, really deep attachments to the medicine they're taking. Okay. Something that I didn't expect was there are some patients who are like completely averse to medicines and they don't want to take a thing. And I just want to take all the natural stuff I know. That's your prerogative. Cool. But some people do have attachments. And of course, there's some that are like physical, like certain abuse potential meds, or, like benzos are very difficult to wean off and taper off. And so, yeah, there is going to be an attachment if I feel good and I go to bed and I sleep well. And it's a little harder to get people off of that med. But there was also this barrier, or I guess educational piece, that kept coming up as a theme time and time again with my patients was this, I had this assumption that the patients kind of already knew about their health conditions incorrectly. Like I'm thinking, oh, she's had it for 20 years. They must have done this over and over and over and over again. But what I would start finding out was, as I would start going through their charts and like trying to explain lab results and talking through what this means and why this relates to your meds, no one has sat down to really do that. Like no one has really sat down to explain what these lab values mean, what is a truly considered to be a low sugar or a high sugar, or signs of having low sugar or high sugar other than what they may feel in a moment. But sometimes I would assume that was already like taught. And I keep finding over and over again, 80% of this is really the lack of education that's continuous. We're not learning one thing in one visit and suddenly you just know it for the rest of your life. And that, I think, is what we get wrong in medicine, is we assume that this one little patient visit for 20 minutes to 30 within the whole process is like, it's stressful. This person had to take off work to get there. This person is losing money just to sit in, or they're having absenteeism because their condition isn't managed and they got to go back to the doctor and lose money doing that, then drive to the doctor, spend money doing that, spend time doing that, try to find a sitter, all these little issues. And we're forgetting that there's a person outside of the health conditions. We're forgetting that there's a whole world of having to navigate life, stress, what's for dinner, am I going to get my rent paid? COVID sucks. There's all these other things circling in their head. And we don't always think that, I don't think we always assume that health is always going to be the top of the patient's mind. You know what I'm saying? Even if they're in for a clinic, it's like, is that really their priority for the now? Even though we want it to be, even though it'd be great if it was all the time. So that's one thing I had to try to address, was the whole person, was this patient-centered approach in realigning with what the patient's personal goals are, what's and of course in the world of geriatrics, we use the 4 M's, like what matters most, what preserves their mobility, what preserves their mentation or mindset, and medications. Like, what medications can we avoid that may cause harm to those three core tenets I described. So in the beginning, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to use the Beers list, start, medication appropriate index, Forta, and all these things, false risk reduction assessments. I'm going to do all these little cool things, and I'm forgetting about the core issue of why the person's in front of me. Like, why they've been a patient for a while, but do they understand what's going on in their bodies? Do they understand how meds are just a piece of this person's care? Like, are we talking about the food? Are we talking about diet, exercise? Are we talking, of course, about those lifestyle changes? How are we talking about stress management, mindfulness, deep breathing? These all can play a role, but I feel we don't quite emphasize that as the core treatment plan. Like, you see it yourselves. We go to the guidelines. We see maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs, 3 or 4 sentences on some of these preventative measures, and then we go into 2-3 whole pages of the drugs and the therapies and what to do if this happens and what that happens. So yeah, there's a blind spot in our healthcare system, and we don't quite emphasize and really monetize and fund other approaches that I think could be used in tandem with these medications. Another crippling belief I made in starting to use deprescribing and putting it on the market was at first kind of just not understanding the market demand for this. And what I mean by that is, in the beginning, I had to, and I still am, doing a lot of heavy lifting in just simple education and just simply talking about overprescribing, what that means, over medications, what that means, polypharmacy, what that means, drug-drug interactions, what that, like, kind of basic, but just letting us reshift this medication mindset that I talk about all the time, is that we have this reactive trigger happiness to meds. So I'm thinking I'm going to go out here and just say, yo, if you're on 20 meds, talk to me. I can get you off with your doctor's supervision, and assume that's going to be enough to sell. And I'm like, wow, there's so many layers to this. There really is, truthfully, a psychological attachment to some of these medications when you've been on them for 10, 20 years. So having to re-educate on opportunities outside of having to take this is a whole nother conversation than just going through a med list. There needs to be a willingness to want to be deprescribed. There needs to be a conversation already assessing the readiness for this, right? There needs to be a conversation with the provider, of course. There needs to be conversations with the caregiver, because if that caregiver sleeps next to their husband who has Parkinson's and is having night terrors every night, they're going to want their husband medicated, whereas the patient may or may not want that, right? So that they can sleep. We don't know. So there just has to be more of a caregiver team-based shared decision making. And yeah, that's what I knew from the basic sense of it, but I came in with a plan to deprescribe, and some people are like, look, bro, I just need to live. And I was like, oh, well, that changes my whole, what am I doing here? It changes your whole perspective. So now it's like, okay, let's at least minimize unnecessary stuff and work with some lifestyle things we can do to get you to where you're going to be at goal. And I think a testament to this was one of my first patients in the beginning who had chronic kidney disease, stage 5. He was on dialysis, and it was secondary to diabetes. And he was actually referred from a fellow doctor and a colleague of mine. And crippling belief number 3, this is where this ties into, is do not undersell yourself, okay? Do not undersell yourself. I was so ready to just help people. I grossly undersold what I should have been charging for to literally work with someone for 6 months. It was a 6-month contract. It was a 6-month concierge contract with this patient. And I mean, I did all the bells and whistles. I gave a presentation on the patient's case to the patient. I had the doctor on speed dial. We were texting for any issues that came up along the way. I was able to make recommendations on the fly and share that with the provider. And the provider would be like, all right, let's do it. And he was cool with it. Whenever our patient was over medicated or had too low of a blood pressure or too low of sugars, our patient would tell me, and then I would just communicate that with the doctor. So we had a great relationship over these 6 months, right? But the patient themselves was not ready to get off some of those bills. And they weren't, and how do I know that? They weren't willing to do some of the work to hit some of those goals, even though we agreed upon it and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's knock it out. I'm here. I'm motivating you. Send me your sugars every day. Send me your blood pressure. Send me everything. Send me your weight, because they also had heart failure, and we want to keep track of their weight and their water weight and their dry weights. I was doing the damn thing. All right. This is my third patient, and I came in excited as hell, but 2 months into this contract, I started tanking energy-wise. I was just like, man, I'm seeing progress, but I am not energetically showing up like I was in the first 2 months. And I'm, again, this belief of I just needed to help someone and not get paid for it. This is lesson number 3. It took a toll on me because now I didn't want to do the work. I didn't want to do the work. I did not want to do the work. I literally started a company to do the work. And within 2 to 3 months of this contract, I did not even want to do the work anymore. This was in 2020, fall of 2020. Yeah, fall of 2020. And my God, I put my heart and soul into this patient, man. And we are still cool to this day. I'm cool with all my patients, man. We're all family. People don't just leave my geriatrics family. We're all in touch still. But this patient, man, like, I try to address every social barrier we possibly could. I helped this man get onto a dual Medicare Medicaid plan, basically a DSNP or dual special needs program as a type of Medicare Advantage plan. And I mean, I didn't do it myself, but I helped push him in the right direction to have someone to help them get enrolled. So we ended up saving him about $200 a month just on him having to pay out of pocket for transportation for dialysis 3 days a week, because he was paying out of pocket, which I'm like, whoa, you can get that covered with Medicare. But we didn't know that. He was only on Medicaid, but he didn't know about Medicare, and he didn't even know that he qualified for a special program on Medicare because of his dialysis. And that was a huge win. Yeah, you can only meet patients where they are. No, I feel you on that, man. Trust me, I lost sleep over this guy, and I love him to death, but I definitely lost sleep. But needless to say, that was one thing we did. Another thing we did was help him with food insecurity. This was like in the beginning of COVID, so it was really tough. Like, a lot of the shelters had lines through the roof, like, right, and talking with his doctor, we were able to find a local program to donate 2 meals a day, 3 days a week. So he's saving about $500 on food a month just because of this program we were able to get him into. So that was a huge win for me. And that happened towards like the third and fourth month of our contract. So not only are we getting him better quality food because it was like cognizant of his health conditions, it was health conscious. We knew that was an issue, but we're sending him now close to like $600 a month just from doing some social service stuff around the med list. Okay. And I'm over here, I am not a jack of all trades. I learned very quickly. Like, I'm not, I'm not a coach. I'm not a motivator, but you kind of have to be in this space. But now I'm trying to get him to work out. Now I'm trying to get him to go up the steps, just baby step his way. Now I'm trying to get him to talk about sleep habits and sleep hygiene and using the CPAP machine and trying to reduce some of these meds because of other lifestyle stuff we're doing. And there was a point, this was the best part, in the third and a half, fourth month of the contract, he was like on cloud 9. We were able to take him off like 2 of the meds. He was on 14, I'd say. There's not much you can do when you're stage 5. But we got him off on like 2 for a little while, right? We were able to decrease the dose on some and stop some others like diuretics because he was doing all the things. He was working out more. He was losing weight. We had better control of the patient's symptoms. But that only happened for a couple of weeks and he was killing it. And then it was just like a plateau and it was just, they were done. They weren't consistent. And I started beating myself because I was like, dang, man, like I feel like we did everything. We educated, we helped the social needs, we managed the meds, we were talking with the doctor, we're doing all things. And my deprescribing energy just went downhill as the patient eventually did. As numbers weren't as controlled, there was less buy-in, and there wasn't that continued readiness to be deprescribed, to want to see these changes, to want to see consistent progress. And I beat myself up. I was like, dang, and I didn't need to beat myself up. That, like one of our commenters said, we can only meet patients where they are. And they mentioned they understand my frustration and it's hard. I'm like, yeah, well, it is. It is, because you want to see them thrive and live quality life. So I guess lesson number 3 is assessing. Lesson number 3 is 1, don't undersell. Don't undersell the type of work we are doing. And during that time, it was a 6-month contract. I made $2,000 off that contract, but over 6 months, if you do the math, it was like a little over $300 a month. So that wasn't an adequate energetic exchange long term. And guess what? The caregiver of this person, or person who actually paid for the contract, literally told me that you should have charged more. The patient's family member told me this at the end of it. And I so appreciate that, because it, again, taught me my value. It showed me my value, and it affirmed that I clearly wasn't energetically showing up. Even though I still delivered and did my promises, I still made the mistake of just underselling just to help people. So that was an interesting lesson. $300 a month doesn't really pay the bills, but it was a tough lesson, but it was a good lesson. And well, I've learned from that. So if I didn't have it, I don't know where I'd be now. So that was lesson number 3. I guess to recap, I'm saying a lot. I'm actually forgetting what I said. And what did I say? Number 1 was, and I think number 2, I was saying, like, don't think it's just all about a med review. Number 3, of course, was underselling value. There's a replay button. I have short-term memory loss anyway, so I'll let y'all tell me what it is. But I also started learning that the demand, like I wasn't able to communicate. That was what it was. I wasn't communicating. I wasn't specific enough to who my market or who my target deprescribing audience was. And also, I didn't know how to communicate the value of what I was doing because there was this initial educational gap between what deprescribing is and how a pharmacist can help you with that. So I took a lot of time in the beginning simply educating around the problem, which is 275,000 people die each year from adverse events, right? 750 seniors are sent to the hospital each day because of medications. We spend $528 billion each year as taxpayers on preventable medication harm in our country. And it's only getting worse. It's only getting worse. In fact, there was an article in Drug Topics that came out this week talking about how the rate of drug-related deaths are actually skyrocketing across the board, across all ages. It was 4.2 out of 100,000 people in 2010. I'm sorry, in 2018. And now, as in 2020, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say the years, but in this year, it has doubled to 8.4 out of 100,000. People are dying, and it's actually higher in males than females. And guess who has the highest death rate among our elderly patients? It's African Americans. 20 out of 100,000 are dying within the African American rate of our population. And what we're seeing in seniors, generally in men, is about 11.7. So 11.7 per population. And I think it's about like 6 for females per 100,000. So the harms from our meds is still here, and I think I've grossly underestimated the importance of leading with my story on my grandma and why this number is so annoying to me, because it's like we as clinicians see this all the time. We see it all the time, and we just pass the buck. And I think for the few who choose the red pill and decide to make their own wave and just do something different or try another approach are the ones I commend, and they're the ones I want to work with. They're the ones I want to integrate into the world of deprescribing, because we cannot maintain what isn't working. Simple and plain. We can't maintain what isn't working. And I hate that that's a number that's still growing and growing. So all I'm doing is talking about the elephant in the room. Number 4 and 5. I talked about monetizing our services. I talked about understanding the market demand. I talked about it's not just the meds. Communicating my value. That was something I wasn't really good at first. I was understanding the barriers for patient awareness around the problem. If people don't know there's a problem, they're not going to think to use me to solve it. And so I wasn't really truly honoring where I was in the beginning, because what I was talking about was pretty new. Not everyone was just thinking about deprescribing. Like, deprescribing only became a really cool search word in like 2014, maybe early 2010. So using the scientific jargon of that, people are still like, what the hell does that mean, DeLon? Like, what, can you explain that? People still ask me that. So it's not like just common sense. So I'm here in my pharmacist brain assuming, oh, you must know what this is, and it's intuitive. And I would over assume things, and that would lead to confusion. So I learned that there needed to be continuous education around the problem, continuous education around the problem. And that is frankly why I'm here in front of you today. Is I've created the Deprescribing Accelerator literally for us to be aware of the problem and then act on it, and then sustainably integrate that into our health policy and systems that serve our seniors, who are the ones who die the most from those very same numbers I mentioned earlier. Medication harm. Lastly, was this assumption that this really huge assumption that providers didn't want my help in a weird way. And I know I mentioned that people were very receptive, but I kind of thought they wouldn't see the value up front. But they do. Providers love us. Team-based is the future, guys. I hope y'all aren't thinking in silos still, but the only way we're going to move the needle on reducing harm is together. It's with a patient, caregiver, healthcare team. There's only one way to do this as a medical team. It can't be done alone anymore. Like everyone, that's the problem. We do everything so siloed. It leads to just gaps in care. There's transition of care issues. There's just lack of communication. There's no consistency. And I'm tired of that. But another kind of more recent thing I figured out was that insurers actually love deprescribing. And they may not use the same word for it, right? Because you may see things like population health management or drug utilization review, right? The dreaded DURs, right? They sound like PAs in a way. But can you imagine a pharmacist, geriatric trained, with a small insurer health plan who's able to keep a subset of people from falling just because they've enacted policy to basically reduce the need of some of those unnecessary meds in a sensitive population? If you can quantify that on a grandiose scale, on a small scale, and show with this intervention and just little pharmacist knowledge, just a little bit, and infuse it into our nurses, infuse it into our prescribing habits, infuse it into our medical schools, infuse it into pharmacy schools, infuse it into policy and claims adjusters, and we continuously do it together, bro, you can do so much more. You can do so much more with these Medicare Advantage plans, with these Medicaid plans. We can do so much more in the world of population health. We can do so much more in these quality improvement organizations that seriously get paid buku Medicare money to audit the type of services these patients receive. Hey, it's already being done. So when are we going to do it together? And so I'm imploring all of us. But yeah, insurers want this. Insurers, they may not use the same verbiage as deprescribing, but they want patients on less meds, and especially if the meds that they're billing for are the ones that lead to potential hospitalizations and harm or worsen care, that they definitely don't want you on those meds. So yes, there are concierge pharmacists that are hired by insurance companies to do this type of work. It may not be the same name, but they're doing this type of work. And I want that available for all of us to see that this can be done. This can be done. This can be done. And then I would also just as a sixth or seventh note, I would add my own faith in myself. And the process was easily the largest crippling belief for me, because I didn't believe in myself that much. I was like, I need to see 100 patients before I could pitch this to Medicaid or, or an office, or you don't need all that. You've already done the work. You've already got the degree. You just got to learn how to really share your story, one, and then particularly talk about the problem. You got to talk about the problem that fires you up every day, because that's what's going to bring demand to you, and that's what's going to bring your ideal client to you, and that's what's going to lead to more revenue and more opportunities to serve more people. That's all this is about, is service. Ooh, that's the 8th point. Shoot, I'm gonna put that in there. I'm bringing a lot of points today. As an 8th point, I actually circled it and forgot to even highlight it. Service is the reason I do all this, because if I didn't do I would not learn so much about people and just navigating this if it wasn't for showing up without expecting anything. But I mean, if y'all don't know me, I'm a fraternity member of Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated. I've always learned to love giving back. If you knew me in undergrad, you know that's who I've been. So I've always been, and service is great to me. And pharmacy school to me was an additional strength of serving. So going to Durham Urban Ministries, doing, working with Shaq at UNC, working with the Piedmont Carborough Family Services over there, just learning how to be with the people, like Latino, Burmese populations, immigrants, like Black people, of course, knowing how to help them in their most vulnerable state is always what drove me. And even in starting my business, I can't lie, the first year and a half I was shooting in the dark, but what I passed my time doing was a lot of community service. So I mentioned being on a COVID task force. I mentioned briefly working with the Community Health Coalition, serving as a telehealth director. I mentioned volunteering with Senior Pharmacists, which is a nonprofit in Durham that helps Medicare eligible patients find the right Medicare plan. And getting into these spaces, not only do you get exposure, but I didn't believe there was value that was long-term. It was more of a, I do it for fun and it's cool to show up and give and go home and sleep it off, right? But I wasn't, in a weird way, there's a gratifying piece, sure, but I wasn't seeing the value of how all of those little buckets of showing up and just being present, and even though it wasn't even related to my business or even related to like making money, because I need to make money in the beginning, those connections I made and even the people I touched and met along the way, in some way or another, have helped me grow and scale my business. Now, like 2 years down the road, I'm still seeing it, but I still get referrals. I still get clients from that. I did a lot of COVID consultations, of course, for anyone who had any questions. That was completely free. It was for anyone, anywhere. I always gave COVID consultations to people in need and gave talks about COVID all the time, ad nauseum. But I learned a lot about the people doing the work. And I was away from that. I wasn't as involved because I was working elsewhere and didn't have energy to do the community things that I was driven and called to do. So lastly, I just want to end with the fact that you don't underestimate showing up authentically and serving your community. I don't care if you're making sandwiches in the soup kitchen or picking up trash on the highway. It really doesn't matter. Like, if you find that joy in giving, I need you to flex that muscle and do it doubly. Do it more, because the connections now, it's connections, yes, but it's like now there's it's paying itself forward in a way that I thought that I didn't value. I didn't see it as important yet. I was like, oh, it's just a thing to do to add to my plate, and I'm not focusing on me. And still keep your boundaries. Don't just give everything out for free, okay? But there, I think the core of deprescribing is there needs to be an alignment of serving. And if you don't have that initial core to serve others in a way that's authentic and simply you and really just with no strings attached, then this isn't for you. This the deprescribing accelerator isn't for you. Seriously, if you don't care about serving at all, and I don't mean just fluffy, I consult a patient. Like, no, I mean like in your church, in your community. I don't care if it's your kid's soccer team. Like, I need you to be active with other people in different worlds of you, so you understand the world and you understand society and you understand how to have that core empathy, which will be a testament to how you will treat your patients. So I learned so much from doing that type of work. And I have to attribute a lot of my growth and notoriety and speaking engagements and media attention and radio interviews and national conventions and conferences and becoming a TEDx speaker from the community. So don't underestimate that. So, man, I like to talk when I get fired up. So I hope today was helpful. Would love to know your thoughts. We've had a lot of comments today, and I don't think I'm going to post all of these, but I love the feedback. I love everyone tuning in and sharing, your thoughts and your perspectives. Let me see. One person mentioned, let's see. Yeah, it's a learning process. Hey, Cheryl. Yes, it's definitely a learning process. Like, understanding how to advocate best is indeed a learning process. And then understanding what you can and cannot control was another thing I absolutely struggled with. Yep, you're right. We can't work for free. We have bills to pay too. You are not alone. We are several who have done that. We can try to lift our competence. It was not free to study. Yeah, it's not free getting that PharmD. No, sir. And yes, also, again, you're right. It's important to lift problems on the table. Otherwise, it's not possible to solve. Team-based work against polypharmacy, regular medication checkups, education of patients, team members, having close ones involved. Values are central as well. Cooperation with others outside of our own organizations to strengthen that. Yeah, man. I mean, it's integral. Like, even with the work with COVID, you start seeing how many people are in the game, and then you start saying, okay, these guys are great for food insecurities. Okay, these guys can help with spiritual health and wellness. These guys are really good for depression and mental health. These guys can help with the support for non-denominational or non-church going type of people. These people are homeless. So you start learning who's in the game, who's playing, and who's already doing the work. And it ends up being a system of referrals and follow-ups. And we can't solve all the problems alone. I wish, but we can't. So yeah, you need a team base, you need a core strategy, and you need a strong referral system and network to truly approach holistic care. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Maryam. Yeah. Empathy and compassion. Like, it needs to be the core of who you are. So glad this resonated with a good bit of you. But these principles are what I infuse, or at least teach you to avoid within our Deprescribing Accelerator. If you don't know what that is exactly what our red pill versus blue pill is about. It's helping to coach geriatric facing nurses, pharmacists social workers, PAs, nurse providers on ways they can integrate and systemically monetize deprescribing within their organization or within their own business, and creating their own business model using deprescribing as a core tenet. So we are recruiting and reviewing applications for our next cohort, which will start next year. We cap at about 5 to 7 people. It's a 12-week hybrid program where you get a mixture of live training and coaching. You learn about marketing yourself for sure, but we're more so focused on deprescribing, the evidence behind it, what is in the pipeline, what clinical tools are out there to help you with that. How do you get comfortable navigating the world of senior care, since a lot of us may not have gotten that geriatrics course in school. I don't think you have to have a board certified geriatric pharmacist credential to be of value for this program. I don't think all these credentials are necessary. I think what's necessary is your ability to learn and your passion to put this into action. A lot of the work we do is putting things into action. So I created this course literally from all of my patients. I created this course from what I've learned and what I've had to use from all of my patients, not just in the last 2 years of geriatrics, but also what I started seeing more after my geriatric credential in retail and in doing volunteer work, and understanding more about the public health component that I think our profession doesn't highlight as much, because we are literally in public health. Like it's not. it's you're a part of it. We're a part of it all together. So our profession is public health, literally. So I think we need to have a better understanding of that. So trying to imbue what I've learned and putting it into a way that can allow you to see this reinvigorated, newer version of DeLon 3.0, because trust me, you didn't want to see DeLon 1.0. He wasn't a happy camper. He hated life. He hated everything. And I don't want that for you if you're experiencing that. And I had that from our profession, and from healthcare as a whole. So hope that resonated with you. Would love to know your comments, your thoughts. Just leave them below. If you want to check out our Deprescribing Accelerator program, you can apply. The link is in the description. You'll learn more about our past alum, Dr. Judy Wallman, Ms. Sharon Fant, and Ms. Charlene Parks, as well as our Elder Options group, which graduated over the summer in Gainesville. And they use some of what we learned to reduce heart failure readmissions with their MedRec and transition of care team. So I'm excited. Today was more of a vulnerable post for me. I wanted to share more about my journey and the mindsets I've had to shift from and learn from mentors and coaches and experience along the way. So that's where I am. So you guys be good. Tune in next week. We'll have another episode of the Red Pill versus Blue Pill next Thursday. You guys have an amazing, amazing week. Be safe and see you next time.